I'm here with Richard Brown, the technical consultant and designer behind the Geckota Phalanx watch, and we're here in a secret meeting in a cellar somewhere to talk a little bit more about this very special watch, and in particular its roots in espionage, secret intelligence, whatever we want to call it. Richard, how are those worlds connected with the world of the Phalanx watch?
They're connected because that's where I started my career.
That is your world?
That was my world, yeah. Yes. That was my world. I joined Her Majesty's government when I was a lot younger, and unbeknownst to me, I joined into a department that was heavily involved with the secret intelligence community. I enjoyed working in that environment enormously, and I stayed with it through the 15 years that I spent in Her Majesty's government.
And when you go there, are you issued with a watch saying that this is the perfect watch for what you need?
No, unfortunately not. In fact, there is, contrary to what people may see from movies, there is actually very little specialist equipment. There's a lot of technical equipment for audio communications, but for personal equipment for covert operators, there really isn't anything particular. There certainly is no one-stop shop watch that every Secret Service officer wears, which is why we felt, given the fact that I have come from that world, that we could create a watch that would be appropriate for a Secret Service officer, a covert officer.
That's a fascinating world. Now, before we even get to talking about the watch, how on earth do you get into that business? Does someone just tug you by the sleeve and drag you into a cellar for a secret meeting, a bit like this one?
Like you've just done?
Like I've just done, yeah.
No, it doesn't work that way. I joined the Foreign Office, and the Foreign Office has some very eclectic departments, and I was heavily involved in a side of it which is completely immersed into the secret intelligence community. You are vetted to an extremely high level in order to operate in these departments, and for obvious reasons they tend to retain you then. And you have the opportunity to move around into different units which may involve counter-narcotics, counter-terrorism, counter-espionage.
How many people then actually knew what you did?
Not that many. It is very important that those worlds are kept covert, because any breach of security obviously could have very detrimental effects. My wife was fully cognizant of what I was doing because she also was from the same environment. But no, it was important not to talk too much about it to people.
So Richard, there you were working in that environment that not many people knew about. What did you see and experience that made you think, well, we need a watch with these characteristics? What are the characteristics that a watch in this environment requires?
It's interesting, there is no specification for any watch to be worn by the secret intelligence community.
Why do you think that is? Because they've got a specification for everything else, I would have thought.
There are specifications, especially for communications equipment, for example, or monitoring equipment. But watches have always just been a personal choice. However, we've always thought there should be a watch aimed at that community, which would be subdued in its design. You can't make a watch covert, but it would not draw particular attention, and it might have functions in it which would be extremely useful.
Can you tell us a little bit about those functions? What have we got on this watch which would make it very relevant to these forces?
Well, I can answer that by telling you about the link between the secret intelligence community and the special operations community. The two work hand in glove. If there's any force required in the secret world, it is always the special operations community that is brought in. Now, the special operations community do have very stringent specifications for all the equipment they use, be it radios, firearms, night vision equipment, and watches. Now, the nature of the job they do lends their equipment to be extremely relevant to the secret intelligence community too. So we thought, why not base the watch on something that would be genuinely operationally viable for the special operations community, and then by default, it would also be a nice nod to the secret intelligence community as well.
So what do we have here? Should we start with the crown?
Yeah, the crown is set at 4 o'clock rather than the traditional 3 o'clock position. This is so that when you're involved in any form of activity, be it climbing or shooting a rifle if you're special operations, the crown doesn't dig in to the top of your hand. Other characteristics are the finish. The watch is anti-reflective in its finish, that being the lens and the case. We have a satin finish and we have a PVD black finish, which is the same as the finish that is on a lot of combat firearms. We have a subdued dial, which has a very low profile patina finish. We also have a relatively low profile luminescence on the watch as well, so it's not excessively bright. Yet the hands we have made bright white. The reason for that is bright white outline hands are current US military specification. So we wanted to have something completely contemporary on the watch that met a current spec. However, in a nod to some of the classic British military watches of the past, we've given them the Phalanx, the sword hands. There's also a decimal time ring on the Phalanx. Special operations community and the aviation community use decimal time. This involves dividing the watch, be it an hour or a minute, into 100 segments. It makes calculations much easier and it gives you greater flexibility to have multiple moving parts within the space of those 100 units. For example, Team A could move into a building at 1352, Team B could move in at 1397.
So you got timekeeping with much greater precision.
Correct, that's right. And the watch is now on NATO straps. We now have Phalanx branded NATO straps, and we've carefully selected the colour to match the finish, whatever finish you would want on the watch. We've got a wonderful collection now of colours to complement that watch.
Now, it's no exaggeration to say, is it, Richard, that operationally these details can be the difference between life and death? Have there been examples in the past of where having the right equipment or the wrong equipment has proved to be absolutely critical?
Yes, there has. There's a special operations unit which I'm closely connected to, and they have had experience of that, and they've had experience of it with a watch. Many years ago, certain special operations watches became very fashionable within the community. These watches involve the use of very large tritium vials on the hands and the indices, and the watches glow in multiple colours and intensely brightly. All of the officers in this unit bought those watches or were issued with them. On a particular evening, and I want to stress this unit is overseas, on a particular evening they had to approach a house with known hostiles who were armed. What was unbeknownst to the team was that the hostile unit had very rudimentary commercially available night vision equipment. Whilst the night vision equipment wasn't sophisticated enough for them to see moving human figures at 200 or 300 meters, what the image intensification of the equipment could pick up on was the intense glowing brightness of the watch faces. And it allowed the hostiles to open fire on the unit long before the Spec Ops people expected the hostiles to be able to open fire.
And that mistake had tragic consequences.
It did unfortunately have tragic consequences in that case, and the watch and derivatives of it were banned overnight within the unit.
This would never, of course, happen with the Phalanx due to, as you said, the subdued lume that we mentioned earlier.
That's correct. It doesn't glow in the same way that the tritium vials would. However, it will glow throughout the night.
Now, let's talk about the way that this watch has been tested and is being tested. One of your other areas of expertise, Richard, is firearms, and firearms are regularly subjected to torture tests where they're buried in mud. I believe even a certain type of mud, not just ordinary mud.
NATO mud.
NATO mud, check it out, NATO mud. Ice, water, mud, everything, they're expected just to work, aren't they, despite what you do to them?
That's correct. One of the things that's very important to understand about special operations units is they are invariably dropped behind enemy lines. They do not have the backup of a base to go and change equipment that's faulty. Their equipment simply has to work. Firearms, which is the most recent background I'm from, we would test them by putting them in mud, water, high pressure water, long-term immersion in water, sand, heat them to very, very high temperatures, freeze them solid, rain, anything that could potentially affect the accuracy and moving parts of those weapons. And unless a weapon has passed all of those tests multiple times, special operations units will not accept those weapons into service. We have subjected the Phalanx to the very same regime of tests.
And not only that, Richard, because I believe there's a special real-life test which is happening right now with an operational unit.
That's correct. There's a unit at the moment overseas who are testing a Phalanx in an operational theatre. It is a unit that is urban-based, so their principal mandate is counter-terrorism, anti-narcotics, people smuggling. They are an armed unit that is active every single evening, and they are currently testing a Phalanx for us, and will report back, and we anticipate good results from it.
So let's just sum this up. This is a watch that's been designed using your experience in Special Forces, in Secret Intelligence. It's been tested to the same standards as some of the world's top firearms, and it's currently being used by some of the most elite Special Forces units which are out on active patrol right now as we're speaking.
That's absolutely correct.
Yeah. So what we have here is something that's entirely genuine, isn't it? It's something that's really very much worthy of the Special Forces name. It's not a gimmick, it's not even a homage. It's something that's ready to be used.
That was absolutely critical from day one. 2 years ago, when Phalanx was nothing more than a piece of paper being sketched out in the Geckota offices, the watchword was it had to be operationally viable. And it was from that position we started. And that position, I believe, we have successfully finished.
What an incredible, versatile, and I think genuine piece of kit we have here.
It is. That's a good way to describe it. It's genuine kit.
Fantastic.